coronavirus, otherwise known as COVID-19. We'll be speaking with a renowned medical practitioner, talking of Dr. Christopher Otabo. He will be shedding light on all that you need to know about the COVID-19. That will be when we come back from this break. Do stay with us. Welcome on program, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, there's so much myth about COVID-19 globally and particularly in Nigeria. Some people believe that it's just one of those big scams. There is no virus, and even if there is, it's still part of the normal sicknesses that people have been suffering all along. What exactly is the true status of COVID-19?
COVID-19 is a real problem in the real world, and it exists, and it's killing people all over the world, and it's present with us in Nigeria.
What is the difference between the COVID-19 and other sicknesses that are related to it?
Like the SARS means severe acute respiratory syndrome. So coronavirus is also a cause of it. And that one was more lethal than this COVID-19.
Kill faster?
Yes, it kills faster, and that has an advantage. Yeah, because the mortality rate for that one was somewhere in the neighborhood of 10%. So it kills almost like 10% of its victims. So it's infectious. And so one is able to contain it because, like Ebola, it quickly burns out itself. But COVID is different. The mortality rate is not as high. It's somewhere around 1%, 2%, in some cases up to 4%. Okay? So, and then secondly too, the incubation period is somewhere around 2 weeks, anytime from a few days to 2 weeks. But the problem is that people who have the virus have the ability to transmit the virus to others without being sick. That is the biggest problem the virus presents to the world. Because apparently normal people are going about shedding the virus because they don't have symptoms. So that makes it very tricky. So one person can give it to 100 people without knowing it. And then it just goes on in a cascade like that. So because of the high infectivity rate, so that 1% of people that it kills becomes significant. Imagine that within a month, 100,000 people are infected. 1% of that is 1,000 who could perish as a result of that infection. And of course, the 100,000 people will be sick, but would have the virus. About 80% would have minor symptoms. Many may not even have. And then the other 20% will be obviously sick. Maybe another 5% will require intensive care. Then a smaller number of that would die. So if we are looking at 100 million people and that will be potentially infected, that means we are looking at 1 million deaths. That's massive. So plus that, part of the problem is that there is no vaccine yet and no treatment for it. So at best, we do what we call symptomatic treatment. If someone has fever, you give antipyretics to reduce the fever. If he has cough, you give some soothing medications to reduce the cough. And if he has respiratory distress such that he can't breathe well, you may have to take over his respiration, and that's where the ventilators come in. So you just keep managing until the individual is able to muster enough defense to overcome the virus. But if not, unfortunately, many would succumb to it.
Yeah, you talk about some people do not have the symptoms, and that makes it even more challenging because you have quite a number of persons who are out there without symptoms and they do not know that they are carriers of this COVID-19. What do we do to those people because they are not being tested?
Yes, that's why contact tracing is very important. So if you know anyone who has come down with symptoms, we have to get to all those that have made contact with that person who is symptomatic. You quarantine the people and make sure that they don't mix with others, whether they have symptoms or not. Because within 2 weeks, if they don't come down with symptoms, even if they had the virus, that means that their body, their immunity is strong enough to take care of the virus. And after 2 weeks, it's expected that the virus would have exited the system.
You're welcome back. We still have with us Dr. Christopher Otabor with us in the studio. You've spoken about the complexity of this disease called COVID-19. How best do we start treating COVID-19 in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you. To start with, there's no treatment. We manage it. When you say treatment for a particular disease, it means that you give a particular medication that has been proven to work for it. And when you give, you expect results. But as it were, there's no treatment for COVID-19, but you manage it.
Doesn't that look like a death sentence to anybody that has been affected or inflicted?
No, because the severity rate is not that high, and those who would develop symptoms are even few compared to all those that got infected. Many of them, just monitoring and treating symptomatically would do. But for the ones that become more severe, other interventions will follow. But right now, like the US president announced some weeks ago, hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin has proven to be good in a number of cases, but the trial was a small trial in a small number of people, and it's not gone through the whole gamut of processes that would ensure that the FDA can approve it. So this is also for the purpose of the public, because I've received some patients who had what they thought was COVID, and they just went on to start taking chloroquine. And they actually came in here with chloroquine toxicity. Yes, fast heartbeat, drowsiness, and fainting. Those are classic symptoms of chloroquine toxicity. Even if one is suspecting COVID, you are not to give yourself chloroquine. The fact that it's available in the market and the store does not mean that you go for it. It can cause more harm. People have died from chloroquine. Yes, let it be the call of the managing doctor to give you chloroquine. And when he does that, he will also prepare for the consequences.
Yeah, Nigeria is already looking forward to some respite with some doctors, experts coming in from China. Do you think this is in the right direction?
Well, I happen to have some information about this. I know because of what happened with China, the virus came out from China apparently, and so many controversies and conspiracies theory about China. So there's a general apprehension or suspicion, as it were, or paranoia concerning China. But I know for this one, the intention is to bring in consumables, personal protective equipment that are lacking in our hospitals, and bring them in the numbers. When Jack Ma brought some things for Africa, we all celebrated it. But what these guys are bringing are many times more than what Jack Ma brought. And because those things are written in Chinese, most of the equipment, people needed to come accompany the equipment. I've seen the list. Ventilators, respirators, so many wonderful things. And so people needed to come and explain the use and interpret and all that. And besides, these are guys who have gone through this path before, and they have experience. They can share experiences. They can share the lessons learned with us. So I think that the public perception is wrong, and that's because the information available is not sufficient. The impression is that the Minister of Health has gone to negotiate with Chinese doctors and is going to use taxpayers' money to bring them, and by so doing, spite the Nigerian professionals. Nigerian doctors are excellent. No one can take anything from them, and they have done very well in this fight. But the idea behind these Chinese doctors is to accompany the very much needed equipment that is being donated, by the Chinese company, who is part and parcel of this society here. What they are bringing is in hundreds of millions of naira to fight, the virus. So I believe that if Nigerians know, they would rather commend the company rather than castigate the government.
Recently, the government decided to go their way of a lockdown in Lagos, Abuja, and I think Ogun State also. Some people have seen this as a very harsh decision taken on the people. How do you read this?
Well, I think the lockdown is an international best practice based on recommendations from experts. The reason is because you want to reduce the social interaction, you want to reduce the contact between people, and in that case, you curtail the rate of spread of the virus. So, the president made an announcement and specifically announced a lockdown for FCT, Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun State. I think that the president got it right with that. And I'm thinking too that that's probably why we are not seeing so much escalation. So if you allow people to continue as though nothing happened, they go to the parties, they go to work, they will infect their staff, they will infect the recreation centers, infect just almost anybody they come across. That will be a time bomb, because it's only a matter of time. The whole country would be in a mess. So this lockdown is helpful to flatten the curve. Yes, and the epidemic curve is such that it rises exponentially. And then after some time, the number of cases would go beyond what the hospitals can cater for. That's actually what leads to many of the deaths. Even though the cases may not be very severe, but because the medical system is overwhelmed, people will die when they should not be dying. So this lockdown is one way of flattening the curve. Another way is good hand hygiene. We are advised to wash our hands with soap for at least 20 seconds because the soap tends to melt the wall of the virus. It creates holes in this virus and it kills it. So there must be some sustained contact. Not just put your hand there and go out. Wash it for quite some time. Then we're advised not to shake hands with people, because we can equally transmit the virus that way. We're advised to keep a safe distance, like what we are doing now, at least 1 meter apart or 3 feet. And then when we cough or sneeze, like we said, most sneezing and most coughing would not be COVID-19, but you never know. Yeah. So we're advised to sneeze into a flex elbow or cough into a clean handkerchief or tissue paper, discard it and then wash the hands. Okay. Then the use of face masks is also important, especially for people who have symptoms. So when you use face masks, you protect other people. Yes, there has been this controversy about whether everybody should be using face masks. Well, that is not generally prescribed now, even though some countries are contemplating it because of the spread, the very fast spread, because people are beginning to think that it's airborne. But what we know up until now is that it spreads through droplets. When we sneeze, we release a lot of droplets, aerosols, and it's inhaled. And then also it can stay on surfaces for some time, and so on and so forth. But there's now a new school of thought that says that it can be in the air. And if it's in the air, then that will require that every one of us will use a face mask to prevent us from inhaling it. But that is also a subject of controversy. So all these things, if we do, it will help us to flatten the curve, which means that it will reduce the number of people who are sick of the virus per time. And that will give the health system the opportunity to recover. But if we have too many cases coming in at the same time, it will be disastrous for the population.
You talk about the flattening the curve. Maybe you just want to give us more insight as to how this actually works, because maybe that is like you said, that is what is responsible for the government decision to effect the lockdown.
Okay.
So how does this actually work?
Okay, I can explain it using the graph.
Let's see.
Okay. Okay, so epidemics are usually represented in graphic form. By the way, a pandemic is a widespread epidemic that's in most parts of the world. So an epidemic is when you have a disease affecting so many people in a particular place at a particular time. So epidemics are usually represented in graphical formats. So we have the vertical axis, which represent the number of cases. And then we have the horizontal axis, which represent time. These two are very important in representing an epidemic because it's the number of cases per time that matter more than any other thing. So let's say this is 100 cases on this. This is 1,000 cases. And then this is 1 million. Okay. Then you have, this is the 0 point. So you have 30 days, 150 days, 180. Okay, so when the epidemic starts, it starts like this. As the time progresses, the number of cases rises. But this rise is exponential. It's not a direct rise, it's exponential. So the graph comes like this. So it rises up to a point. If nothing is done, it continues to rise until the disease burns itself out, or when it has killed as many people as possible, the maximum number of people, such that there are not too many people for it to infect anymore. And then it peaks and it begins to drop. Also, when there's a high herd immunity, when many people have developed immunity to the virus, that's when it also peaks. And then the cases begin to come down until it gets to 0. But this natural course of event is dangerous because so many people would be killed by the virus. Why? There's a line here which would represent the capacity of the healthcare system. Okay. So in this case, the healthcare system can take 5,000 cases at any given time. Anything more than 5,000 means that the healthcare system is overwhelmed. So numbers above this is calamity for the health system. Anything above 5,000, people will get to the hospital and they will not get treatment, even for minor cases that they would have survived. Why? Because the epidemic has overwhelmed the health system. You don't want this to happen. So we say we must flatten the curve. How do you flatten the curve? You want to reduce the rate of infection, and therefore you reduce the rate of rise of the graph. And how do you do that? You represent that by this. You flatten the curve. Okay? This, if something is done on time, the graph will not rise like this. It will be like this. And that is what the president tried to achieve and is achieving by having people stay at home. To flatten the curve and reduce the number of infection, such that you push the number of cases down to the level that it will be less than the hospital capacity. As things stand today in Nigeria, the number of cases of COVID-19 patients is far less than the hospital capacity. So we are fine. But if we allow people to move around and interact, the rate of infection would rapidly increase. Within a short time, you can overshoot 100,000 cases. But the moment you go above this 5,000, then mortality rates will increase because we have gone above the capacity of our healthcare system. So this is the epidemic curve. But another interesting thing about the epidemic curve is that when you flatten the curve, the number of infection reduces, but the time frame that the disease would stay will also be longer than in the epidemic, in the normal, natural epidemic curve. So this is what we mean by flattening the curve. So how do we flatten the curve? by reducing social interaction. That's what we are doing by staying at home. By washing our hands with soap for 20 minutes after we sneeze. By using face mask when we are having upper respiratory tract symptoms like sneezing or coughing. And also, if you are close to anybody like that, you use face masks too. By maintaining a good social distance, at least 1.5 meters apart when you are talking, so you don't get droplets coming in.
It has been an awesome time with Dr. Christopher Otabo on Agenda 2030 for this week. He has spoken to us and enlightened us on what we need to know about COVID-19, precautionary measures we need to observe, and also what needs to be done when somebody around us is infected. And until we come your way next time on Agenda 2030, I am Desmond Utomen. We ask from this end that you stay safe, even as you keep observing all the guidelines.